The crystal glass caught the downtown lights as Derek Soren raised it above the crowd. 43 floors up, the rooftop bar of the Meridian Tower offered a view of the entire city, and tonight it felt like Derek owned every square inch of it. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried across the gathered employees of Torchlight Media, smooth as aged whiskey. "Tonight we celebrate excellence. We celebrate vision. We celebrate someone who understands that in this business, you either rise or you fall." I stood near the back, nursing my bourbon and watching my wife Selah beam under the spotlight Derek had created for her. She wore the navy dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one that made her eyes look like sapphires. Her auburn hair caught the ambient lighting perfectly, and her smile was the practiced one she used for clients and cameras. "Some people rise," Derek continued, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found mine. "Others stay behind." Every head in that room turned toward me. 47 pairs of eyes, some curious, some pitying, some barely concealing their amusement. The account executives, the creative directors, the junior associates who still believed hard work mattered more than office politics. All of them looking at Keaton Merren, the contract consultant who'd married above his station. I lifted my glass and clapped. Loud, enthusiastic, genuine-sounding applause that echoed off the glass walls. I even threw in a whistle for good measure. "That's my girl," I called out, grinning like the proud husband everyone expected me to be. Derek's smile faltered for just a moment. He'd wanted to embarrass me, to highlight how Selah had outgrown her marriage to a mid-tier consultant who specialized in corporate contracts. Instead, I'd stolen his thunder by refusing to play the wounded spouse. What Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I controlled the one contract keeping his company alive. Torchlight Media looked impressive from the outside. Glass offices, trendy furniture, a client roster that included 3 Fortune 500 companies. But I'd negotiated their primary revenue stream 18 months ago, a consulting agreement between my firm and theirs that guaranteed exclusivity on their biggest account. The Meridian Group, Derek's golden goose, paid Torchlight $12 million annually for advertising services. The contract had performance milestones, specific, measurable targets that Derek's team needed to hit every quarter. Missed 2 consecutive quarters, and the exclusivity clause expired. Missed 3, and I could terminate the entire agreement with 30 days' notice. They'd missed 2 quarters already. Derek knew it, but he'd been gambling that I wouldn't notice or wouldn't care enough to act on it. After all, why would a loving husband sabotage his wife's career? To Selah Merren, Derek raised his glass higher. Our new vice president of strategic development, a woman who understands that success requires sacrifice. More applause. Selah stepped forward, accepting a crystal award shaped like a flame. Torchlight's logo, naturally. She looked radiant, confident, completely in her element. "Thank you, Derek," she said, her voice carrying the slight southern accent she'd never quite lost despite 15 years in New England. "This promotion means everything to me. When I started here 3 years ago, I knew I'd found my home. 3 years ago. 6 months after we'd bought the brownstone on Elm Street. Right around the time she'd started working late, taking weekend calls, developing what she called her professional network. I pulled out my phone and opened the shared calendar app we used for household scheduling. Selah's calendar showed her at this party until 10:30, then travel home. But when I switched to the view that included her work calendar, the one she'd forgotten I had access to, I saw something interesting. Tomorrow she had a client strategy session from 9 to 11. Derek's calendar showed off-site planning meeting for the exact same time slot. I scrolled back through the past month. The pattern was there, clear as daylight once you knew what to look for. Late meetings that aligned perfectly. Off-site sessions that matched. Even a 3-day conference in Boston that they'd both attended, staying at the same hotel. Keaton. The voice belonged to Becca Hartwell, Selah's best friend and Torchlight's HR director. She'd appeared beside me with the stealth of someone who trafficked in office gossip. "You must be so proud." "Absolutely," I said, sliding my phone back into my jacket. "Selah's worked incredibly hard for this." "She has. Those late nights, the weekend strategy sessions. Derek really pushed her to excel." Becca's tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes held a glimmer of something else. Knowledge, maybe, or anticipation, like she was waiting to see how I'd react to her little verbal landmine. "Derek's a hands-on manager," I agreed. "Very involved with his team's development." "Oh yes, very hands-on." Becca sipped her martini, watching my face over the rim. "They make a good team. Very collaborative." The music shifted to something with more bass, and conversations grew louder to compensate. Across the room, Derek had his hand on Selah's lower back, guiding her toward a group of clients. The gesture looked professional, but it lasted a few seconds too long. "Excuse me," I told Becca. "I should congratulate my wife." I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting congratulations on Selah's behalf. The account managers wanted to talk shop, asking about upcoming contract negotiations. The creative team complimented my tie. Everyone was friendly, inclusive, treating me like part of the Torchlight family. They had no idea I was about to become their worst nightmare. "Keaton!" Selah spotted me approaching and broke away from Derek's client group. She rushed over and kissed my cheek, her perfume mixing with the scent of champagne. "Can you believe it? VP of Strategic Development?" "It's incredible," I said, pulling her into a hug. "You've earned every bit of it." Derek says this is just the beginning. With the new Meridian expansion project, Torchlight's going to triple in size over the next 2 years. The Meridian expansion. I'd heard rumors about it during my own client meetings, but nothing concrete. If Derek was already counting on that revenue, he was making a dangerous assumption about contract renewals. "That's ambitious," I said. "Meridian's been happy with the current arrangement?" "More than happy. Derek says they're ready to make Torchlight their exclusive agency for all North American campaigns. Can you imagine? $40 million annually, guaranteed for 5 years. $40 million. No wonder Derek felt confident enough to humiliate me publicly. With that kind of money, he could afford to alienate a small-time consultant. "When does the expansion start?" I asked. "Next quarter, assuming we hit our current milestones." Selah's expression flickered for just a moment. There was some confusion about the metrics, but Derek's handling it. Confusion about the metrics. That was one way to describe missing your targets by 30%. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek's voice cut through the crowd noise, "if I could have your attention for one more moment." The room quieted, all eyes turning back to the makeshift podium Derek had created near the windows. "I want to share something with you all," he continued, "a lesson I learned early in my career. Success isn't just about talent. It's about commitment. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes, to sacrifice whatever you must, to achieve excellence." His eyes found mine again, and this time the challenge was unmistakable. Some people understand that sacrifice. They embrace it. They rise. He paused, letting the words sink in. Others cling to comfort, to mediocrity, to the familiar, and they stay behind. The room was silent except for the ambient music and the distant hum of traffic 43 floors below. Everyone could feel the tension, even if they didn't understand its source. I started clapping again. Slow, deliberate applause that echoed in the sudden quiet. "Beautifully said, Derek," I called out, my voice carrying clearly across the room. I couldn't agree more about sacrifice and commitment. I walked toward him, still clapping, my footsteps loud on the polished concrete floor. "In fact," I continued, "I've learned something similar in my own work. Contracts, for instance. They're all about commitment, about holding people accountable for their promises." Derek's smile looked increasingly strained as I approached the windows where he stood. "The beautiful thing about a well-written contract," I said, now close enough that the entire room could hear every word, is that it doesn't care about personalities. It doesn't care about office politics or who's sleeping with whom. A few people gasped. Selah's face went pale. It only cares about performance, about meeting the obligations you've agreed to meet. I stopped directly in front of Derek, still smiling. And when those obligations aren't met, well, that's when things get interesting. Derek's jaw tightened. I'm not sure what you're implying, Keaton. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. The Meridian contract has specific performance milestones, measurable targets, and according to my records, Torchlight has missed 2 consecutive quarters. The room was completely silent now. Even the music seemed to have faded into the background. That's... Derek started, then stopped. His eyes darted to Selah, then back to me. That's a matter for private discussion. Is it? I pulled out my phone and opened the contract management app I used for all my clients. Because according to Section 12, subsection C of the agreement, missing 3 consecutive quarters triggers an automatic review period. Miss the 3rd quarter, and the client has the right to terminate with 30 days' notice. Derek's face had gone from confident to ashen in the span of 30 seconds. This quarter's numbers aren't final, he said, his voice strained. We still have 2 weeks. True, I agreed. 2 weeks to make up a 30% shortfall. That's ambitious. I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me. Account executives who'd been planning their bonuses, creative directors who'd been scouting for larger office space, junior associates who'd believed Derek's promises about expansion and growth. But hey, I said, raising my glass one final time. Some people rise, others stay behind. Right, Derek? I drained my bourbon and set the empty glass on the nearest table. Selah, congratulations again on the promotion. I'm sure you'll do great things with it. I leaned in and kissed her cheek, whispering just loud enough for Derek to hear. For however long it lasts. Then I walked toward the elevator, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces and one very pale CEO who was finally beginning to understand just how precarious his empire really was. The brownstone on Elm Street had been Selah's dream house. 3 stories of renovated Victorian charm, with original hardwood floors and enough period details to satisfy her Pinterest boards. We'd stretched our budget to afford it, but she'd insisted it was an investment in our future. Now, sitting in my home office at midnight, I wondered whose future she'd really been planning for. I'd left the party 3 hours ago, but Selah still wasn't home. Her last text said she was having a quick drink with the team to celebrate. The location services on her phone showed her at the Meridian Hotel bar. The same hotel where Derek had been staying during his apartment renovation for the past 6 weeks. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Torchlight contract files. As the negotiating consultant, I had access to all performance data, financial reports, and milestone tracking. What I found there made Derek's panic earlier tonight perfectly understandable. Quarter 1, revenue targets missed by 18%. Quarter 2, missed by 24%. Quarter 3, currently tracking at 31% below target with 2 weeks remaining. The Meridian Group had been patient, probably because they liked working with Torchlight's creative team. But patience had limits, especially when dealing with multi-million-dollar contracts. I scrolled through the detailed reports, looking for explanations. What I found was a pattern of mismanagement that bordered on negligence. Budgets allocated to non-existent projects. Billable hours that couldn't be accounted for. Expense reports for client development that included weekend trips to Boston, New York, and Martha's Vineyard. All approved by Derek Soren. All coinciding with Selah's mysterious conference schedule. My phone buzzed with a text from Selah. Home soon. Don't wait up. Long day tomorrow. Long day indeed. I had some calls to make. The next morning, I was in my downtown office by 7:30. Merren Consulting occupied half a floor in a modest building 6 blocks from Torchlight's gleaming headquarters. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and it generated enough revenue to support our lifestyle and Selah's expensive tastes. My assistant, Jennifer Walsh, arrived at 8 with coffee and a stack of contract reviews that needed my attention. "How was the party last night?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Educational," I said. "Jennifer, I need you to pull the complete file on the Torchlight Meridian agreement. Every addendum, every performance report, every piece of correspondence." "Is there a problem with the contract?" "There might be. I also need you to schedule a call with Tom Bradley at Meridian. Tell him it's regarding quarterly performance reviews." Jennifer made notes on her tablet. She'd been with me for 5 years and knew better than to ask too many questions when I used that particular tone. "Anything else?" "Yes. Contact Mike Torino at Harbor Investigations. Tell him I need to meet today if possible." This time Jennifer did look up from her tablet. Harbor Investigations handled corporate due diligence and background checks for my clients. Mike was an ex-journalist who'd transitioned into private investigation after his newspaper folded. "Should I ask what this is regarding?" "Due diligence on a potential partnership," I said. It wasn't entirely a lie. Jennifer nodded and left to make the calls. I turned back to my computer and began documenting everything I'd observed over the past few months. Selah's schedule changes, the mysterious conferences, her new wardrobe that cost more than her salary should have supported, the way she'd started pronouncing certain words differently, adopting Derek's slight East Coast accent. My phone rang at 9:15. Tom Bradley's name appeared on the screen. "Tom," I answered. "Thanks for calling back so quickly." "Keaton, good to hear from you. Jennifer mentioned something about quarterly reviews?" Tom Bradley was Meridian's VP of Marketing, the executive who'd originally approached me about finding an advertising agency. He was straightforward, results-oriented, and had little patience for excuses. "That's right. I wanted to touch base about Torchlight's performance. As the consultant who negotiated the agreement, I like to stay on top of how things are progressing. Honestly, we've been concerned. The creative work is still excellent, but the account management has been inconsistent." "In what way?" "Missed meetings, delayed deliverables, and some questionable expense charges that Derek keeps saying he'll explain but never does." I made notes as Tom talked. Everything he described aligned with what I'd seen in the performance reports. "Have you discussed these concerns with Derek directly?" "Several times. He keeps assuring us that things will improve, that he's implementing new management systems, but we're not seeing results." "What about the renewal discussion? I know Derek's been talking about expansion." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Between you and me, Keaton, expansion isn't on the table right now. We're actually considering whether to exercise our early termination option if this quarter doesn't show significant improvement." Early termination. Derek had been telling Selah they were planning to triple the contract, when in reality Meridian was ready to walk away entirely. "I appreciate the honesty, Tom. If you don't mind me asking, what would it take to turn things around?" "At this point, new management. Derek's a creative guy, but he's not an operations manager. The account needs someone who understands accountability." After hanging up with Tom, I sat back in my chair and considered my options. I could approach Derek privately, offer to help restructure the contract terms to give Torchlight more time. I could have a conversation with Selah about what I'd discovered, give her a chance to explain. Or I could let Derek continue digging his own grave while I documented every shovelful of dirt. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike Torino. "Free for lunch. Usual place, noon." The usual place was Oscar's Tavern, a dive bar 3 blocks from the courthouse that served the best burgers in the city and attracted a clientele of lawyers, investigators, and courthouse reporters. It was the kind of place where conversations were private and everyone minded their own business. Mike was already at our regular booth when I arrived, a beer half finished in front of him and a manila folder beside his plate. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Rough night. Thanks for meeting on short notice." "No problem. Jennifer was vague about what you needed, but she mentioned it was personal. Mike Torino was 53 years old, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that came from 30 years of asking uncomfortable questions. He'd been investigating cheating spouses, corporate fraud, and insurance scams since before the internet made everything easier. "I need you to look into someone," I said, sliding into the booth across from him, discreetly. "Your wife?" Mike's directness was one of the reasons I'd always liked working with him. No judgment, no unnecessary sympathy, just professional efficiency. "My wife and her boss, Derek Soren, CEO of Torchlight Media." "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Where they go, what they do, how long it's been going on, financial records if you can access them legally. I also need to know about their business practices. Expense accounts, client entertainment, anything that might be questionable." Mike made notes in a small notebook he pulled from his jacket pocket. "Timeline?" "As soon as possible. And Mike, I need this to be completely confidential. If this gets back to either of them before I'm ready, it won't," Mike said firmly. "I've been doing this long enough to know how to be invisible." He slid the manila folder across the table. "Speaking of which, I brought you something. Remember that background check you had me run on Derek when Selah first started working there?" I'd forgotten about that. 3 years ago, when Selah had been excited about her new job, I'd asked Mike to do a routine check on Derek and Torchlight, standard due diligence for anyone entering my wife's professional orbit. "What did you find?" "At the time, nothing concerning, but I keep files on everyone I investigate, and I update them periodically when new information becomes available." I opened the folder and found a comprehensive dossier on Derek Soren. Financial records, employment history, legal filings, even social media activity. "Page 12, Mike said, taking another sip of his beer. I flipped to page 12 and found a series of financial documents, bank statements, credit reports, and investment accounts. "Derek's been living beyond his means for the past 18 months, Mike explained. "His personal expenses have increased significantly, but his salary hasn't. He's been supplementing his income somehow." I studied the numbers. Derek's official salary was $180,000 annually, but his spending patterns suggested an income closer to $300,000. "Any idea where the extra money's coming from?" "That's what I intend to find out. But based on what you've told me about the company's performance issues, I'd guess he's been creative with expense accounts." Creative with expense accounts. That would explain the mysterious conference trips, the client entertainment expenses that couldn't be accounted for, the luxury hotel stays during his apartment renovation. "How long do you need?" "Give me a week, maybe less if they're not being careful about covering their tracks." Mike finished his beer and stood up. "Keaton, I have to ask, what are you planning to do with whatever I find?" I closed the folder and met his eyes. "I'm going to make sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve." That afternoon, I returned to my office and began preparing for the most important contract negotiation of my career. Not with a client, but with my wife and her lover. I pulled up the Torchlight agreement and read through every clause, every subsection, every piece of fine print. I'd written this contract myself, which meant I knew exactly where Derek was vulnerable. Section 12, subsection C, performance milestones and termination clauses. Section 8, subsection A, expense account restrictions and audit requirements. Section 15, moral turpitude and professional conduct standards. Derek had violated at least 2 of these sections, possibly all 3. The question wasn't whether I could terminate the contract. The question was how much damage I wanted to inflict in the process. My phone buzzed with a text from Selah. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." I looked at the time. 4:47 p.m. According to her calendar, she had no meetings scheduled after 3 o'clock. I typed back, "No problem. I'll probably work late too. Love you." The response came quickly. "Love you too." 3 little words that had once meant everything to me. Now they felt like just another lie in a relationship built on deception. I opened a new document on my computer and began typing, Notice of Contract Review, Torchlight Media Agreement. It was time to remind Derek Soren that some people rise and others fall, and sometimes the person holding the rope gets to decide which direction you go. The Riverside Industrial District had been abandoned for 15 years, a collection of empty warehouses and rusted machinery left over from the city's manufacturing heyday. It was also completely private, with no security cameras and no foot traffic after sunset. Perfect for a conversation that needed to stay off the record. I'd texted Derek that morning, asking for a private meeting to discuss contract modifications that could benefit both parties. I'd suggested the industrial site as a location where we wouldn't be interrupted by employees or clients. Derek, probably sensing an opportunity to negotiate his way out of trouble, had agreed immediately. What he didn't know was that Mike Torino had spent the past week documenting every hotel visit, every expense account fraud, and every lie Derek had told to cover his tracks. I arrived at the meeting site 15 minutes early, parking my car behind a defunct loading dock where it wouldn't be visible from the main road. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and industrial rust. In the distance, the lights of downtown created a warm glow against the darkening sky. Derek's black Mercedes pulled up at exactly 8 o'clock. He stepped out wearing an expensive suit and the confident expression of a man who thought he was about to charm his way out of trouble. "Keaton," he called out, walking toward the loading dock where I waited. "Thanks for suggesting this location. Very discreet." "Privacy is important for sensitive negotiations," I replied, "especially when discussing contract violations." Derek's smile faltered slightly. "Violations? I thought we were here to discuss modifications." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. "We are. But first, I want to make sure we're both clear about the current situation. Are you recording this?" "I'm documenting it. For legal purposes." I held up the phone so Derek could see the recording interface. "Unless you have something to hide?" Derek's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. What do you want to discuss?" I pulled a manila folder from my jacket and opened it to the first page. Mike's investigation had been thorough, documenting 3 years of financial irregularities and personal misconduct. "Let's start with expense account fraud," I said, reading from the report. "The Meridian Group has been billed for client entertainment expenses totaling $47,000 over the past 18 months. Hotel stays, restaurant meals, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard. Those were legitimate business expenses. Were they? Because according to hotel records, you weren't meeting with Meridian executives during those trips. You were meeting with my wife." Derek's face went pale in the dim light from my phone's flashlight. "I don't know what you think you've discovered," he said, "but I think I've discovered that you've been using company funds to finance an affair with a married employee. I think I've discovered that you've been lying to your biggest client about expansion plans while your company fails to meet basic performance targets. And I think I've discovered that you're about to lose everything." Derek took a step backward, his confident demeanor cracking. "Look, Keaton, whatever you think is happening, I know what's happening. The question is what we're going to do about it." I closed the folder and looked directly at Derek. In the industrial lighting, his expensive suit and perfect haircut looked almost comical against the backdrop of rusted machinery and broken concrete. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to call Selah into your office and explain that her promotion was a mistake. You're going to tell her that Torchlight is facing financial difficulties and needs to reduce personnel costs." "I can't do that. The promotion was announced publicly." "Then you'll have to publicly reverse it. I'm sure you'll think of something creative. You're good at creative explanations." Derek's hands clenched into fists. "You can't force me to destroy her career because you're jealous." "Jealous?" I laughed, the sound echoing off the empty warehouse walls. "Derek, I don't give a damn about your relationship with my wife. What I care about is the fact that you've been stealing from your clients to pay for it." I stepped closer, close enough that Derek had to look up to meet my eyes. "You see, I wrote that contract. Every clause, every subsection, every piece of fine print. And buried in Section 15 is something called a moral turpitude clause. It states that if Torchlight's management engages in conduct that could damage the client's reputation or business interests, the contract can be terminated immediately." Derek's face had gone from pale to ashen. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't I? Let me paint you a picture of how this plays out. Tomorrow, I call Tom Bradley at Meridian and explain that their advertising agency has been using company funds to finance an extramarital affair. I provide him with hotel receipts, expense reports, and photographic evidence of you and Selah together. I pulled out my phone and showed Derek a photo Mike had taken 3 days earlier. Derek and Selah entering the Meridian Hotel together at 10 p.m. Meridian terminates the contract immediately. Without that revenue, Torchlight goes bankrupt within 60 days. 47 employees lose their jobs. Your reputation in the industry is finished." Derek stared at the photo, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "Or," I continued, "you can make this easy. Fire Selah. Cite financial difficulties. Give her a decent severance package and a neutral reference. End the affair. Clean up your expense accounts. And maybe, just maybe, I'll help you restructure the Meridian contract to give you time to turn things around." "You're insane," Derek whispered. "I'm practical. You made a choice to humiliate me publicly. You made a choice to steal from your clients. You made a choice to seduce my wife. Now you get to live with the consequences." Derek looked around the empty industrial site, as if hoping to find some escape route that didn't exist. "What about Selah? What happens to her in your little revenge fantasy?" "Selah made her choices too. She'll find another job, probably at a company that doesn't engage in financial fraud. Consider it a learning experience." "She loves me," Derek said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Does she? Or does she love the idea of being with a successful CEO? Because in about 60 days, you're going to be an unemployed executive with a reputation for financial misconduct. Let's see how much she loves you then." I stepped back and closed the folder. "You have 24 hours to decide. Fire Selah and clean up your act, or I destroy everything you've built. Your choice." Derek's hands were shaking now, whether from anger or fear, I couldn't tell. "You can't prove any of this," he said weakly. I smiled and held up my phone, which had been recording our entire conversation. "Actually, I can, and I will, unless you do exactly what I've told you to do." Derek stared at me for a long moment, his face cycling through anger, desperation, and finally resignation. "You're not the man I thought you were," he said. "No," I agreed. "I'm much worse. I'm the man who reads contracts carefully and remembers every clause." Derek turned and walked back toward his Mercedes without another word. I watched him drive away, his headlights disappearing into the industrial maze of abandoned buildings and empty lots. Then I pulled out my phone and called Mike Torino. "It's done," I said when he answered. "Derek knows exactly where he stands." "How did he take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. Mike, I need you to keep watching them. If Derek tries to warn Selah or if they try to run together, I want to know immediately." "Understood. What's your next move?" I looked out at the city lights in the distance, thinking about Selah sitting at home, probably texting Derek about her day, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. "Now I wait," I said, "and we see if Derek is smart enough to cut his losses." But even as I said it, I knew Derek wouldn't take my offer. Men like him didn't back down when cornered. They doubled down, convinced they could charm or manipulate their way out of any situation, which was exactly what I was counting on. The Harvest Festival had been a downtown tradition for 12 years, transforming the business district into a maze of vendor booths, food trucks, and entertainment stages. This year, Torchlight Media was a major sponsor, with Derek scheduled to speak at the main pavilion about innovation in modern marketing. I stood near the back of the crowd, watching Derek take the microphone with his usual confidence. 24 hours had passed since our meeting at the industrial site, and he'd apparently decided to ignore my ultimatum entirely. Selah sat in the front row, still glowing with the pride of her recent promotion. She wore a burgundy dress that complemented the fall decorations, and her smile was radiant as she watched Derek begin his presentation. "Good afternoon, everyone," Derek's voice carried clearly through the pavilion's sound system. "I want to talk to you today about the future of marketing, about innovation, creativity, and the courage to take risks." The crowd, mostly local business owners and marketing professionals, listened attentively. Derek was a gifted speaker, charming and articulate, with the kind of presence that made people want to believe whatever he was selling. At Torchlight Media, we've built our reputation on delivering results for our clients. Companies like the Meridian Group trust us with their most important campaigns because they know we understand accountability. Accountability. I almost laughed at the irony. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Tom Bradley, who I knew was attending the festival. "You might want to pay attention to Derek's presentation. I have some questions about those results he's talking about." Tom was sitting 3 rows behind Selah. I watched him check his phone, then look up at Derek with a slightly puzzled expression. Derek continued his presentation, discussing market trends and creative strategies. He was building toward his big announcement, the expansion project that would supposedly triple Torchlight's revenue. "Which brings me to some exciting news," Derek said, his smile widening. "I'm pleased to announce that Meridian Group has committed to a 5-year expansion of our partnership, increasing our annual contract value to $40 million. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Selah beamed with pride, probably calculating her bonus potential. Several audience members pulled out their phones to take pictures of this moment of triumph. I walked forward through the crowd until I was close enough to the microphone to be heard clearly. "Excuse me, Derek," I called out, raising my hand. "I have a question about that announcement." Derek's smile froze as he spotted me in the crowd. "Of course, Keaton. What's your question?" "As the consultant who negotiated the original Meridian contract, I'm curious about the timeline for this expansion. Has Meridian confirmed these numbers?" The crowd turned to look at me, some recognizing me as Selah's husband, others simply curious about the interruption. "The details are still being finalized," Derek said carefully. "But the commitment is solid." "That's interesting," I replied, pulling out my phone. "Because I spoke with Tom Bradley from Meridian yesterday, and he mentioned some concerns about current performance metrics." I could see Tom Bradley sitting in the crowd, his expression growing more alert as he realized where this was heading. "Tom," I called out, "you're here today, aren't you? Maybe you could clarify the status of the expansion project?" Tom stood up slowly, looking between Derek and me with obvious confusion. "I'm not sure what expansion project you're referring to," Tom said, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet pavilion. "Meridian hasn't committed to any contract modifications." The crowd murmured with confusion. Derek's face had gone pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. "There seems to be some miscommunication," Derek said into the microphone. "Tom, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Actually," Tom interrupted, his voice growing firmer, "I think we should discuss it right here. Derek, you've been telling us for months that performance would improve, but we're still seeing the same issues. Missed deadlines, questionable expenses, and now you're making public announcements about agreements that don't exist?" The crowd was completely silent now, sensing drama but not understanding the details. "Furthermore," Tom continued, standing up and walking toward the front of the pavilion, "our accounting department has flagged several expense reports that we'd like you to explain. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, travel expenses that don't seem to correspond to any legitimate business activities." Derek gripped the microphone stand, his knuckles white against the metal. "Tom, this isn't the appropriate venue for—" "Isn't it?" Tom's voice was getting louder, his corporate politeness giving way to genuine anger. "You made a public announcement about our business relationship. I think the public deserves to know the truth." I watched Selah's face as understanding began to dawn. Her smile faded, replaced by confusion and growing alarm. "The truth is," Tom continued, "Meridian Group is considering terminating our relationship with Torchlight Media due to consistent performance failures and questionable business practices." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Several people started taking pictures and videos with their phones. Derek looked around desperately, searching for some way to regain control of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, "there seems to be some confusion about—" "There's no confusion," I interrupted, walking to the front of the pavilion. "Derek, would you like to explain to everyone how you've been using client funds to finance personal expenses? Or should I?" Derek's eyes darted to Selah, who was staring at him with growing horror. "Keaton, you're out of line," Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Tom, would you like to see the documentation I've prepared? Hotel receipts, expense reports, financial records showing exactly how your money has been spent?" I pulled out the manila folder Mike had prepared and handed it to Tom. As he flipped through the pages, his expression grew darker. "These are hotel charges for the Meridian Hotel," Tom said, reading from the documents. "Billed to our account as client entertainment expenses. But according to these records, no Meridian employees were present at these meetings." The crowd was completely captivated now, watching this corporate drama unfold like a real-life soap opera. "Derek," Tom continued, "can you explain why you've been billing us for hotel rooms that you used for personal purposes?" Derek opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. Selah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the concrete floor of the pavilion. "Derek," she said, her voice shaky, "what is he talking about?" The microphone picked up her words, broadcasting them to the entire crowd. Derek looked at her, then at Tom, then at me. His carefully constructed facade was crumbling, revealing the desperate, cornered man underneath. "I can explain," he said weakly. "Then explain," Tom demanded. "Explain how you've been stealing from your biggest client. Explain how you've been lying about expansion projects that don't exist. Explain how you've been using company resources for personal affairs." The word affairs hung in the air like an accusation. Selah's face went completely white as she realized what Tom was implying. "Derek," she whispered, but the microphone caught it, amplifying her shock for everyone to hear. Derek pulled the microphone closer, as if he could somehow salvage the situation with the right words. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "there have been some misunderstandings." "The only misunderstanding," I interrupted, "was thinking you could steal from your clients and humiliate people without consequences." I walked up to the microphone and gently took it from Derek's trembling hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the crowd directly, "what you've witnessed today is what happens when people confuse success with character. Derek Soren has been lying to his clients, stealing from his company, and betraying the trust of everyone who believed in him." The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word. "Some people rise," I continued, echoing Derek's words from the previous night. "Others fall, and some people make sure the elevator is going in the right direction." I handed the microphone back to Derek and walked away, leaving him standing alone on the stage with 400 witnesses to his humiliation. Behind me, I could hear Selah's voice, shrill with panic. "Derek, tell them it's not true. Tell them you didn't—" But Derek had nothing left to say. His empire was crumbling, his reputation was destroyed, and everyone who mattered was watching it happen in real time. As I walked through the crowd toward the festival exit, my phone buzzed with a text from Mike Torino. "Just saw the video online. Impressive work. What's next?" I typed back, "Now we see how far they're willing to fall." The parking garage beneath the Meridian Tower was nearly empty at 11 p.m., just a few scattered vehicles belonging to security guards and late-working executives. I'd been waiting there for 45 minutes, sitting in my car with the engine off, watching the entrance. Derek's Mercedes finally appeared, descending the spiral ramp with its headlights cutting through the underground gloom. He parked 3 spaces away from my car, probably thinking he was being subtle. I watched him sit there for a moment, gathering courage or planning his approach. The festival disaster had happened 6 hours ago, and social media was already buzzing with videos of his public humiliation. The hashtag #Torchlight Meltdown was trending locally, and several business blogs had picked up the story. Derek finally got out of his car and walked toward mine. I rolled down my window as he approached. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse from stress. "Do we? I thought I made my position clear yesterday." "You've destroyed everything. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss my resignation. Meridian is terminating the contract. Half my staff has already started looking for new jobs." "Sounds like the market correcting itself," I replied. "What did you expect would happen when you ignored my offer?" Derek leaned against my car, his expensive suit wrinkled and his hair disheveled. "What do you want? Money? I'll pay you whatever you're asking." "I don't want your money, Derek. I wanted you to face consequences for your actions. Mission accomplished." "This isn't just about me. 47 people are going to lose their jobs because of your vendetta. 47 people are going to lose their jobs because their CEO was stealing from clients. Don't try to make me the villain in your story." Derek's frustration finally boiled over. He slammed his hand against the roof of my car, the sound echoing through the empty garage. "You sanctimonious piece of garbage. You think you're so much better than everyone else, sitting in your little office, judging people who actually take risks and build things?" I got out of my car slowly, standing to face Derek in the dim fluorescent lighting. "I think I'm better than people who steal, lie, and cheat their way through life," I said calmly. "If that makes me sanctimonious, I can live with that. You have no idea what it's like to run a company, to make payroll every month, to deal with the pressure." "So you decided to deal with the pressure by embezzling client funds and having an affair with a married employee? Brilliant strategy." Derek's face twisted with rage. "Selah came to me, you know. She was miserable with you, bored out of her mind with your safe little life and your safe little job. She wanted excitement, passion, someone who could give her the life she deserved." "The life she deserved," I repeated. "Funded by stolen money and built on lies. Very romantic. At least I gave her something to be excited about. What did you give her? Stability, security. How thrilling." I studied Derek's face in the harsh garage lighting. He was desperate, cornered, lashing out with whatever weapons he could find. But his words revealed something interesting. He genuinely believed his own justifications. "You're right," I said. "I gave her stability and security. Boring things like honesty and fidelity. Clearly I was holding her back." Derek seemed encouraged by what he interpreted as agreement. "Exactly. Selah is an extraordinary woman. She needs someone who can match her ambition, her drive. Someone who understands that success requires taking risks. Someone who understands that success requires stealing from clients," I corrected. "Tell me, Derek, when Selah finds out that your risk-taking has left you unemployed and unemployable, how excited do you think she'll be then?" Derek's confidence wavered. "She loves me. This is just a setback." "Does she?" "Because 3 hours ago, I watched her leave the festival in tears. She hasn't answered your calls, has she?" Derek's silence was answer enough. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Tomorrow, the business community will wake up to the full story of your fraud and incompetence. The local business journal will run a detailed exposé. I've already provided them with all the documentation they need." "You can't do that. I have a family, a reputation." "You had a reputation. You destroyed it yourself when you decided to steal from your clients and lie to your employees." Derek's desperation was turning to panic. There has to be something we can work out. Some way to fix this. There is, I said. You can accept responsibility for your actions, resign quietly, and hope that criminal charges aren't filed. Criminal charges? Embezzlement is a felony, Derek. The Meridian Group could press charges if they wanted to make an example of you. Derek staggered backward, the full weight of his situation finally hitting him. You've thought of everything, haven't you? He whispered. I'm a contract consultant. Thinking through contingencies is what I do for a living. Derek looked around the empty parking garage as if searching for some escape route that didn't exist. What about Selah? What happens to her? Selah will land on her feet. She's talented, and she wasn't directly involved in the financial fraud. She'll find another job, probably with a company that doesn't engage in criminal activity. She'll never forgive you for this. Probably not. But she'll survive, which is more than I can say for your career. Derek pulled out his phone and stared at the screen for a moment. I should call her, he said. Explain what happened. Try to work something out. You should, I agreed. But Derek, when you call her, remember that she's about to find out that the man she thought was successful and powerful is actually a fraud who's about to be unemployed and possibly facing criminal charges. Keep that in mind when you're explaining how much you love her. Derek looked at me with something approaching hatred. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I'm enjoying justice, I replied. You humiliated me publicly, stole from your clients, and destroyed your employees' livelihoods. The fact that you're finally facing consequences? Yes, I'm enjoying that very much. Derek turned and walked back toward his Mercedes without another word. I watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing up the spiral ramp toward street level. My phone buzzed with a text message from Selah. Where are you? We need to talk. I looked at the time. 11:47 p.m. She was probably at home, trying to process everything that had happened, wondering how her perfect new life had collapsed so quickly. I typed back, on my way home. But first, I had one more call to make. I dialed Mike Torino's number. It's late, Mike answered. This better be important. Derek just tried to convince me that this is all a misunderstanding. I think he's planning to run. Run where? His reputation is finished, his company is bankrupt, and half the city watched him humiliate himself on live video. Desperate people do stupid things. I want you to keep watching him. If he tries to leave town or access any hidden accounts, I want to know immediately. You really think he'd run? I thought about Derek's face in the parking garage, the panic and desperation I'd seen there. I think Derek Soren has spent his entire career believing that charm and manipulation could get him out of any situation. It's going to take him a while to accept that this time is different. And if he doesn't accept it, then he'll do something even more stupid and we'll be there to document it. I hung up and started my car, heading home to face whatever conversation awaited me there. But as I drove through the empty streets toward Elm Street, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, complete control of my own life. Derek Soren had wanted to humiliate me, to make me feel small and powerless. Instead, he'd given me the opportunity to demonstrate exactly how dangerous it could be to underestimate a man who reads contracts carefully and remembers every clause. Some people rise, others fall, and sometimes the person holding the rope gets to decide which direction you go. The brownstone on Elm Street was dark except for a single light in the living room window. I sat in my car for a moment before going inside, preparing for what would likely be the last honest conversation Selah and I would ever have. She was waiting in the living room, still wearing the burgundy dress from the festival, but now it looked wrinkled and defeated. Her makeup was smeared from crying, and she held a glass of wine with shaking hands. How long have you known? She asked without looking up. About the affair? 3 months? About the financial fraud? 2 weeks. Why didn't you say anything? I sat down in the chair across from her, maintaining distance between us. I wanted to see how far you'd go, how many lies you'd tell, how much you were willing to destroy for Derek Soren. Selah finally looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. I never meant for it to happen. It just developed over time. Developed. That's an interesting way to describe betraying your marriage and helping your lover steal from his clients. I didn't help him steal anything. I didn't know about the expense account issues. Didn't you? All those weekend trips, the hotel stays, the expensive dinners. You never wondered where the money was coming from? Selah was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine glass. I thought he was successful. I thought he could give me the kind of life I wanted. The kind of life you wanted. What kind of life was that exactly? Excitement, adventure, something bigger than... She gestured around our carefully decorated living room. This. You mean our home, our marriage, our life together? Our safe, predictable, boring life together, she said, her voice gaining strength. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone who never takes risks? Who never dreams of anything bigger than the next contract negotiation? I leaned back in my chair, studying the woman I'd been married to for 8 years. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone who confuses excitement with character? Who thinks adventure means stealing from clients and lying to your spouse? I didn't steal anything. You benefited from stolen money. You enjoyed vacations and hotel stays that were paid for with embezzled funds. That makes you an accessory. Selah's face went pale. Accessory to what? Embezzlement, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, Derek's facing potential criminal charges, and anyone who knowingly benefited from his crimes could be charged as an accomplice. You're lying. You're trying to scare me. I pulled out my phone and showed her a text from Mike Torino. DA's office reviewing case files. Charges likely within 48 hours. Selah read the message, her hands shaking harder. This is your fault, she whispered. You destroyed everything out of spite. I exposed the truth. Derek destroyed everything when he decided to steal from his clients. You could have handled this privately. You could have talked to me, given us a chance to work things out. Work things out? You mean cover up the fraud and pretend your affair never happened? Selah stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. We could have found a solution. Derek could have paid back the money, ended the client relationship, started over somewhere else. With what money? Derek's been living beyond his means for 2 years. He doesn't have $40,000 to pay back, and no legitimate company is going to hire a CEO with a reputation for embezzlement. Then what was I supposed to do? Stay married to you and pretend to be happy for the rest of my life? The question hung in the air between us, honest and brutal in its simplicity. You were supposed to be honest, I said finally. You were supposed to tell me you were unhappy instead of lying and cheating. You were supposed to ask for a divorce instead of stealing company funds to finance your affair. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. So you decided to humiliate me publicly instead. Much more considerate. Selah collapsed back onto the couch, her composure finally breaking completely. What happens now? She sobbed. Derek won't return my calls. The company's finished. My career is ruined. Your career isn't ruined. You're talented, and you weren't directly involved in the financial crimes. You'll find another job. With who? Everyone in the industry will know what happened. Everyone in the industry will know that you had an affair with your boss. Embarrassing but not career-ending. The embezzlement charges will be Derek's problem, not yours. Selah looked up at me through her tears. Unless you decide to make it my problem, too. I considered her words carefully. I had enough evidence to implicate Selah as an accessory to Derek's crimes. Hotel receipts, expense reports, documentation of her knowledge and participation in the fraudulent activities. That depends, I said. On what? On whether you're finally ready to be honest about what you've done. Selah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup further. What do you want me to say? I want you to admit that you betrayed our marriage. I want you to admit that you helped Derek steal from his clients. And I want you to admit that you only care about the consequences now because you got caught. Selah stared at me for a long moment, weighing her options. Fine, she said finally. I had an affair with Derek. I knew he was using company money to pay for our trips and dinners. And yes, I only care about the consequences because we got caught. Why? Why what? Why did you do it? The real reason, not the excuse about excitement and adventure. Selah was quiet for several minutes, considering her answer. Because Derek made me feel important, she said finally. He made me feel like I was worth something more than being the wife of a contract consultant from a middle-class family. You are worth something more. You're intelligent, talented, capable of building your own success without stealing or lying. But that would have taken years. Derek offered me a shortcut. A shortcut that required betraying your marriage and participating in criminal activity. Yes, she said simply. And I took it because I wanted what he was offering more than I wanted to stay married to you. The honesty was brutal, but it was also liberating. For the first time in months, Selah was telling me the truth about what she'd done and why she'd done it. What happens to us? She asked. There is no us anymore. You made that choice when you decided Derek Soren was more important than our marriage. So you're divorcing me. I'm divorcing you. The papers will be filed tomorrow morning. Selah nodded, as if she'd been expecting this. What about the house? The house is in my name. The mortgage is in my name. You can pack your things and find somewhere else to live. That's it? 8 years of marriage, and you're just throwing me out? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where we'd planned to build our life together. 8 years of marriage and you threw it away for a man who's about to be arrested for embezzlement. I'm just making it official. Behind me, I heard Selah crying again, but the sound no longer moved me. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike Torino. Derek just left town, heading north on I-95. Want me to follow? I typed back, let him go. He can't run from federal charges. Selah looked up as I finished typing. Derek's running? She asked. Apparently. Probably figured out that charm and manipulation won't work on federal prosecutors. He didn't even say goodbye. Did you expect him to? Derek Soren is a coward who steals from his clients and abandons his accomplices when things get difficult. Why would he treat you any differently? Selah stared at her phone, probably hoping for a text or call that would never come. I've made a terrible mistake, she whispered. Yes, I agreed. You have. The question is what you're going to do about it. What can I do? Derek's gone, my career is ruined, my marriage is over. Your career isn't ruined, your marriage is over because you ended it, and Derek was never worth saving anyway. I walked toward the stairs, heading to the bedroom to pack a bag. Where are you going? Selah called after me. Hotel. I'll be back tomorrow to collect the rest of my things. You have until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live. Keaton, wait. Can't we talk about this? Try to work something out? I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned back to face her. There's nothing to work out. You chose Derek over me. You chose excitement over stability. You chose crime over honesty. Now you get to live with those choices. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am genuinely sorry. I believe you. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry Derek turned out to be a coward. You're sorry your shortcuts didn't work out. But you're not sorry you betrayed our marriage, because you'd do it again if you thought you could get away with it. Selah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. We both knew I was right. Some people rise, I said, echoing Derek's words from what felt like a lifetime ago. Others stay behind, and some people make damn sure the elevator's going down. I climbed the stairs to pack my bag, leaving Selah alone in the living room with her wine and her regrets, and the ruins of the life she'd thrown away for a man who wasn't worth saving. Outside, The first light of dawn was beginning to show on the horizon. A new day was starting, and for the first time in months, I was looking forward to seeing what it would bring. The contract had expired, the marriage was over, and Keaton Merren was finally free to write his own terms.